The California prison system has an official chain of command, wardens, guards, administrators, and then there is the real chain of command. The one that actually controls what happens inside those walls. And it has been running continuously for over 60 years without a single day off. Here is something the California Department of Corrections will never put in a press release. The men with the badges are not the most powerful people in California's prisons. They manage the schedule. They control the movement. They write the incident reports. But the men who actually determine what is permitted, what is prohibited, who is protected, and who is targeted inside those facilities are not wearing uniforms, they are wearing numbers. And they have been in charge in a very specific and very real sense of the daily reality of incarcerated life in California since 1957. Today, we go inside the real power structure of the California prison system. Not the official one, the one that actually works. The beginning where the power came from. To understand who controls California's prisons today, you need to go back to a specific moment in a specific facility in 1957. Because what happened in that moment created something that nobody who was present for it could have predicted would still be operating with this level of sophistication 67 years later. Duell Vocational Institution, Tracy, California. A group of Mexican-American inmates faced a problem that was both immediate and structural. The California prison system in the late 1950s was racially violent in a way that had no institutional response. Black inmate organizations were forming and consolidating power. White inmates were beginning the process that would eventually produce the Aryan Brotherhood. And Mexican-American inmates, the fastest growing population in the California system, had no organized structure to protect themselves, to manage their affairs, or to represent their interests in the brutal daily negotiation of prison survival. The Mexican Mafia was their answer. LAIM, and from the first day of its existence, it operated on a principle that would prove to be the source of all its subsequent power. It did not limit itself to protecting its members inside prison, it reached outside. It connected the inside to the outside in a way that no previous prison organization had attempted at scale. And that connection, that bridge between the controlled environment of the institution and the free world beyond its walls, is the foundation on which everything that follows in this video is built. The Mexican Mafia. LAIM. The Mexican Mafia does not look like what most people imagine when they hear the words prison gang. It has no colors, no hand signs thrown on street corners, no visible street presence that law enforcement can photograph and document and present to a jury as evidence of organized activity. It has something more durable than any of those things. It has a tax. Every drug sale that occurs in any neighborhood that falls within the geographic scope of LAIM's influence generates a percentage that flows upward, not eventually, continuously. A street dealer in East Los Angeles selling product that moves through LAIM-controlled supply chains pays his percentage. The gang above him that manages his block pays their percentage. And that money moves through a network of intermediaries into the hands of men who are currently incarcerated in California state prisons and who have not touched a drug transaction directly in years or decades. This is what makes LAIM genuinely different from every other prison organization operating in California. It is not primarily a prison gang that has street connections. It is primarily a criminal enterprise that uses prison as its headquarters. The incarcerated members are not the disadvantaged portion of the organization waiting to be released so they can return to power. They are the senior leadership. The inside is the center. The outside is the operation. Members earn their way into LAIM through a process that begins on the street and continues inside. There is no application. There is no recruitment pitch. There is a period of years during which a person's behavior, their loyalty, their reliability under pressure, and their willingness to do what is required without being asked twice is observed by existing members who are evaluating whether this person represents a liability or an asset to something they consider permanent. When the evaluation concludes positively, a sponsoring member presents the candidate to the existing membership, and the membership votes. In La'im, unlike the Aryan Brotherhood, where a single no vote ends the process, the standard requires strong consensus, but not absolute unanimity. What it does require, without exception, is that the new member prove themselves through an act of violence that the existing membership witnesses or verifies. The act is not symbolic. It is the literal price of entry into something that will define the remainder of your life regardless of whether you ever leave prison or spend the rest of your days inside it. Nostra Familiar. The Northern answer the Mexican Mafia's dominance over Mexican-American inmates in California created something that the founders of La'im probably considered a compliment even as it became a genuine threat. It created a rival. Nostra Familiar emerged in Soledad State Prison in 1968, born directly from the conflict between Northern California and Southern California Mexican-American inmates over La'im's dominance of resources inside the prison system. The geographic division that defines this conflict, the line between Norteños and Serranos, Northern and Southern California street gang affiliates, is one of the most consequential and visible lines in American criminal geography. It runs roughly through Fresno in California's Central Valley. South of that line, La'im's authority is recognized and its tax is paid. North of that line, Nostra Familia's authority is recognized and its own structure operates. This is not a peaceful division. The conflict between La'im and Nostra Familiar has produced decades of violence inside California prisons and on California streets that law enforcement has spent enormous resources trying to manage and contain within the prison system. The practical consequence of this division is that every Mexican-American inmate who enters the California state prison system is immediately and automatically placed into one of two categories based on where they are from. There is no neutral position. There is no opting out. Where you are from determines which structure you are operating within before you have made a single decision inside the facility. The Aryan Brotherhood. The white power inside. We covered the Aryan Brotherhood in a previous Dark Ranks video, so we are not going to spend the same amount of time here. But in the context of California's prison power structure specifically, the Aryan Brotherhood occupies a position that requires explanation because it is more complex than simply being the dominant white inmate organization. The Oven California maintains business relationships with La'im that cross the racial lines on which the organization was theoretically founded. This is not a contradiction that troubles the of leadership in any documented way. The ideological framework of the organization exists to serve organizational interests. When organizational interests require doing business with La'im, the ideological framework adjusts to accommodate the business. Drug distribution inside California prisons involves La'im and the Aryan Brotherhood cooperating on supply, pricing, and territorial division in ways that any ideologically consistent reading of either organization's stated principles would make impossible. In the California prison system, the stated principles are the public face. The business arrangements are the reality. The Black Guerrilla family was founded in San Quentin State Prison in 1966 by George Jackson, a Black Panther and activist who was serving a sentence for robbery and who used his time and sight to develop a political and organizational framework for Black inmates that went significantly beyond the protection focus of other prison organizations. The BGF was explicitly political from its founding in a way that La'im and the Aryan Brotherhood were not. Its stated objectives included the eradication of racism, the maintenance of dignity inside prison, and the overthrow of the United States government. The last objective has not been advanced in any meaningful practical way. The first to have shaped the organization's internal culture in ways that make it structurally different from the other major organizations in California's prison system. The BGF maintains a formal educational component that is unusual in the prison gang landscape. Members are encouraged to develop political consciousness, to read, to engage with ideas about power and resistance that connect their individual incarceration to broader historical and social frameworks. Whether this makes the organization more or less dangerous depending on how you define dangerous is a question that different people answer very differently. What it unambiguously makes the organization is more complex than the other major players in California's prison power structure, and more difficult for prison administrators to manage because the tools designed to manage conventional gang activity are not as effective against an organization whose members are. Thinking about their situation in explicitly political rather than simply criminal terms. How the structure actually works now that we have the individual organizations. The picture of how California's prison power structure actually operates in daily practice looks like this. When an inmate arrives at a California state prison, the classification process that the institution conducts formally to determine housing assignment is paralleled by an informal classification process conducted by the organizations already present in the facility. Where is this person from? What is their affiliation? What is their history? What do they bring to the facility in terms of connections, skills, or liabilities? This informal classification is often complete before the institutional one is. The result of both classifications determines where the person will be housed, who they will be around, and what the first weeks of their incarceration will look like in terms of safety, access to resources, and the nature of the obligations that will be expected of them. Drug distribution inside California prisons flows through the organizational structure in a way that mirrors the cartel structure we covered in previous videos more than most people realize. Product enters the facility through a variety of methods: corrupted staff, packages passed during visits, creative use of institutional mail, and is distributed through a chain of organizational relationships that ensures the people at the top of the structure maintain distance from the physical product while capturing the financial benefit of its sale. Violence inside California prisons is almost never random. When a stabbing occurs in a California maximum security yard, there is an organizational decision behind it in the vast majority of cases. A debt that was not paid, a disrespect that required a response to maintain organizational credibility. An order from a senior member that was carried out by someone lower in the structure who will absorb the institutional consequences, while the person who gave the order remains insulated from them. Prison administrators understand this. They have understood it for decades. And the frustration that experienced correctional officers describe when discussing the gap between their institutional authority and the organizational authority operating parallel to it within their facilities is one of the most consistent themes in professional literature about California prison management. 67 years, multiple generations of leadership. Dozens of federal prosecutions that removed senior figures and watched the structures rebuild around the removals. The prison power structure of California is not a collection of gangs that happen to share a geography. It is a set of institutions, old enough to have developed traditions, stable enough to have survived everything the state has thrown at them, and sophisticated enough to have adapted to every new security measure, every new intelligence capability, and every new prosecutorial strategy without losing the fundamental capacity that makes them what they are. The California Department of Corrections manages the schedule. It controls the movement, it writes the reports. But the organizations that have been operating inside its facilities since 1957 manage something more fundamental than any of those things. They manage the reality of daily life for hundreds of thousands of people in ways that the institution cannot reach and has never been able to fully neutralize. That is the secret power structure of California's prisons. It has been running without interruption for longer than most of the people currently inside those facilities have been alive. And tomorrow it will still be running. Subscribe to Dark Ranks. Every structure has a hierarchy. Every hierarchy has a price. Stay dark.